useState, context, maybe Redux, no, Zustand. For state management in React, we have a lot of different options. So which one should we use at which point? Which one is actually better? Which one is more recommended? Let's go through them. Hello, I'm Shubhajit Ghosh. I am a full stack software engineer with more than 6 years of experience. I post videos related to software engineering experience, software engineering tips and tricks. So if you like this type of video and content, please consider subscribing. Okay, so let's look at the primary setup through which we will be explaining which state management tool we should use at which point and which one is better. Okay, let's go ahead. Now, if you see, this is our main setup. So we have a main component, and in that main component, we have two state 1, state 2. In that main component, we have also one child component, and that child component is consuming only the state 2, not state 1. Okay. So in this particular setup, we are going to understand how this 4 reacts. Obviously, there are other libraries as well, and all of those have their specific behavior, but all of them will fall under one of these 4 categories. So if you look at it, then all these 4 will cover most of the situations for state management. Okay. Now, useState, this is the simplest one and most efficient one, not most efficient, the most, I will say easiest one to do, right? So using useState, you simply declare 2 states, and if another state or if another component like a child need to access that particular state from the parent, then you will have to do props drilling and you will have to pass that state. Okay. For context, for Zustand and for Redux, all for these 3, you actually declare the store separately, right? And then from that store, for all this, for the context, Zustand and Redux, you declare a store separately. And then from that store, you can directly access the states, whether it can be state 1 or state 2, all these will live here, and you will access the state directly from the outside store to your child or to your parent, however you like, right? Okay. So far we have understood this part. Now, one critical thing is how this particular state management actually works. So if I have to explain this, then context, what it does, the most irritating thing or the negative point about context is it re-renders a lot. So let's say you have declared these 2 states and you have used state 1 and state 2, right? State 1 you have used in the main component, state 2 you have used in the child component. Now, to use context, you have to wrap your component in using a context provider. So you will have, let's say, a provider here, right? You will have to wrap your whole component using a context provider. Now, whenever, let's say, a state is updated, let's say only state 1 got updated. So theoretically, what we will want as a developer is only the main component should update, not the child, because state 1 is not getting consumed in child, right? Only state 2 is getting used in child. But in context, that doesn't happen. Even if you have multiple states in context, if one of them updates, any component who is consuming context, that means any component where you have used that particular context value under that particular context provider, any component, they will be updated. Okay. So even if you have only updated state 1, both the main will also update, the child will also update. We will see it in code. So please have a look at this theory first, then we will go ahead and see the code. Okay. For Zustand, we have another store, and then the better thing with Zustand is it only updates the particular component where it is needed. So if state 1 is updated, then it will update main as well as state 1. And if state 2 is updated, then obviously it will update your state, like wherever that particular state was that particular state was used. So state 2 is updated, so it will update the child. Okay. For Redux, the thing is, for Redux also the same thing as the Zustand, where it will only update the component where that particular state is used. But the better thing with Redux is, with Redux we get a lot more flexibility, because in Redux we have a lot more capability to manage subscription. By subscription I mean like which particular component has subscribed to that particular store and how they are using it. So there are a lot more flexibility there. You have different sorts of API calls, data caching, a lot of things that you can do with Redux. So if you are looking for a lot more extended features, then probably Redux will be a better choice. But if you are looking for just a simple state management, then Zustand will be more than sufficient for you, and most of the time you will end up using either Zustand or useState. context has a very specific use case. Okay, now let's go ahead and see the code. So if you see, I have set up a simple component where I have given 4 different examples. One is the useState one is context, Zustand and Redux. And in all of that, the state 1 is this loading state and the state 2 is this re-rendered triggered state. Okay, so in the primary component, in the primary example, you will see I have shown a loading state just to toggle the loading state, that's it, and also a button to toggle the re-rendering state, and the child component also I have called. This same setup I have repeated in the context as well, in Redux as well, in Zustand as well. So there is nothing different there. Okay, now if you go to the example and if you see, so the top one is related to the useState, then after that context, then Zustand, then Redux. Let's say I toggle the loading state. This loading state is getting used only in the top state, only in the top state, not in the child. So if I toggle the loading state, you will see only that main example, only that main useState component was re-rendered, not the child. But when I re-render the toggle the re-render state, at that time the parent is also getting re-rendered, the child is also getting re-rendered. Okay, so that means, as I mentioned initially, that if only you have a small number of components where you want, let's say props drilling is fine, you don't have to go in depth, a lot of nested components are not there, then useState is perfectly fine. This is the context, and remember I said that with context the worst thing is it re-renders all of the consuming components. So if you see, when I toggle the loading state, it re-renders the main component as well, the child component as well. But theoretically the child should not re-render, because the child should only re-render when this re-render gets toggled, re-render state gets toggled, right? So it re-renders the child even when the loading state, which is not getting consumed by the child, when that also gets updated, the child gets re-rendered. So that is the negative point about context. For Zustand, you will see the toggling loading state only the main one, and toggling child only the child as well as the main, that's fine. And for Redux you will find loading only the main one, and for re-rendering for child. Okay, so these are all fine. Keep in mind one thing though, keep in mind with Zustand, there is one thing that a lot of developers do mistake. So as you see in this example, I can see that if only loading state is toggled, only loading state is updated, then only the main component gets updated, not the child. To make sure that only the consuming component gets updated, you have to make sure that you call state from Zustand in a particular way. So if you see my child, yes, so here you see that I have called the re-rendering state from from Zustand in this particular way, where I am accessing the state and then directly getting the desired value from that state here only. There is another way of accessing this, which is you can destructure and then use it there. Never do this. The reason is because you will end up using Zustand as context. In this particular example, when you are destructuring directly from the store, that means it will behave as an object. So if anything in that particular store or Zustand store gets updated, you will end up re-rendering your child as well. So if I save this, then go back, then you will see in this Zustand example, previously when I was toggling the loading state, it was only re-rendering the parent, but right now it is re-rendering the parent as well, the child as well. So never do this. Make sure that you select only the necessary state that you need. In that way, you will end up with this behavior where only the main component and only the desired component will re-render basically, right? So that's all. This is the difference, and let's go through a little bit of contextual part also here, which is when you should use which one. Let's say you have a very small project where it is only about one component or two component, three component, and you want to share state in between them. It is simple setup. You can go ahead with useState or you can go ahead with Zustand. useState, you will have to do a little bit of prop stealing, but 1-2 component prop stealing is fine. Do not use useState if you have a lot of components, let's say 5, 6, 7 layers of different components, and you have declared one state in the parent. You want to access it somewhere down the line in the child, let's say in the 4th, 5th or 6th component, then you have to do a lot of prop stealing. So do not, useState is not recommended there. It's much more beneficial to use Zustand there. For context, think of it as grouping. Usually how I use context is, Let's say there are cases where I know for a fact that if this particular value gets updated, it is better to actually re-render all of the child components. There are situations like that, where I find if this particular value gets updated, then it affects most of the child. Let's say not all of the child, but most of the childs. Let's say out of 3, 4, 5 childs, 4 children are gonna get affected. In that case, using context is perfectly fine. The reason is, context is obviously React's inbuilt method, right? Native method. So you are not gonna use up third-party libraries and all. So if that is something that you care about, that you do not have the flexibility to use third-party libraries and you run into this particular situation, then that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and use context, right? Then after that, you have another one, which is Zustand. In most of the cases, in 90% of the cases, Zustand will be better for you. The reason is because you also get this optimization. And other than that, it is also smaller in size. The only difference in between Zustand and Redux is Redux has a lot more boilerplate and also it is a lot bigger. So you have a lot more maintenance to do, and at the same time, you have to keep in mind that Redux has its own use cases. Redux has a lot more flexibility, a lot more power behind it, and that is why if you need those particular features, then Redux will be perfectly fine. But other than that, if you are using Redux in even small cases, you are simply wasting your time, because it will be much harder for you to manage the Redux store and it is simply overkill. So if you are looking for something more flexible, better suited for everyday usage, for every different purposes, most of the time go for Zustand or something similar solution. I just gave the example of Zustand because that is one of the most famous libraries. Doesn't mean you only have the option of Zustand, you have others as well. So please do your research and please keep these 4 things in mind. Whenever you are choosing a state management library, always think about re-rendering, because most of the state management library has this thing in mind. What are they re-rendering? Are they re-rendering the whole tree? Are they re-rendering only, sorry, I keep on struggling with this word, re-rendering. Are they re-rendering, sorry, are they re-rendering the only, the whole tree, or are they re-rendering only the specific child? Keep that in mind and you will find out that your app's performance or your whole project performance will jump up by a lot. Okay, give it a try, and if you have any doubt regarding this, please let me know. Thanks.